Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We're an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change. My name is John Bredin. I am the host of the show and the co-producer of the show, along with my wonderful wife, Claudia Canasto Chabuki, who is filming me right now in our apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey, where we're beginning today's show, which is titled The Healing Power of Community. If you look at our show, if you look from the beginning, we've been about community from day one. We really started the show in a bookstore in Hoboken, in a used bookstore, where we had community dialogues. We brought people together for roundtables, citizen roundtables, where we talked about the burning issues of the day. This was back in 2010. This was a year before Occupy Wall Street began to articulate problems such as wealth inequality, the corporate control of media, the corporate control of education and culture, and many of those issues. But we were talking about that in this bookstore with ordinary citizens. We would very often have an audience gathered as well. So we are trying with our show to be a vehicle of community building in the United States, where we live. Claudia and I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is a mile-square town, wonderful for community because we have a very walkable main street, which is Washington Street. You walk up and down, you see people you know, you say hello. Hopefully they're not too busy to say hello back, but we realize that we're in a society today that is overworked, overstressed. We try to bring this up on our show, that we need a shorter work week. Okay, I think people are very overworked today. When I ran for president in 2008 and 2012, I was calling on a 25-hour work week. Okay, you didn't hear much about my campaign because I didn't get any corporate campaign donations, so we couldn't buy much media time. And except for our little show, which doesn't reach a large audience, you know, we're a cable show. We're on basically cable TV in Hoboken, New Jersey, also New York City, the Big Apple, New York, which is also a place that I have criticisms of. I want to be very clear that I think that Manhattan in particular has become very, very fast-paced and alienating, and we're very critical of the rising rents that are causing these small businesses to close at an alarming rate in places like Greenwich Village, which were once a bastion of community life, when, you know, people would bump into each other in the street, on the sidewalk, you know, intellectuals would gather in cafes, artists would bump into each other, and it was this kind of thing does not happen anymore in places like Greenwich Village. We are a advocate of cafe culture, what we call cafe culture. People should gather in cafes for discussion, for discourse, for dialogue. It is dialogue that is I think really the foundation of community life. When you see people and say hello and you have a little chit chat on the sidewalk, okay, this is something very, very important. You're not hearing about the importance of this in our mainstream media. They don't talk about it. It doesn't exist if you watch the big shows, okay? Now, as far as the big shows go, I think they have their work cut out for us. We're in the Trump era now, and there's a very controversial president. We are a nonprofit TV show, so we don't make political statements one way or the other. We're nonpartisan, but we want to be about good ideas for a better world, for a better society, for better communities, and we think it all starts with the face-to-face interaction, okay? With hi, hello, how are you? Back and forth interaction, put down the smartphone, put down the cell phone, put down the iPhone, look each other in the eye, and say hello. I can't be more clear about that, but I think the other thing that has to be said here, though, is that education plays a key part in the building of community or in the destruction of community. Okay? Now, the way I see it, our educational system today doesn't care about community. It doesn't. If you're concerned with high-stakes testing, okay, with moving away from the humanities, which we've seen in the past several decades, all right? They're not teaching art and culture. They're not teaching philosophy as they once did in our colleges. I know, I teach in our colleges. And so we're trying to sound the alarm here. We're trying to sound the alarm before America sinks into a new dark age, a digital dark age. I have actual books in front of me on my table here, okay? Because I still read actual books, and one of them is Plato's The Gorgias. I'm going to hold that up. Plato's The Gorgias, and actually there's no "the" in front of it. It's just Gorgias, and it's a very interesting dialogue because one of the things that comes through in Gorgias is the difference between dialogue and oratory. What we see in our political climate today is an overemphasis on oratory, on the flowery speech, on being entertaining in your speech. Socrates didn't believe in that. Socrates felt that oratory is something that can convince you that bad things are actually good, okay? So oratory has to do with salesmanship. And the opposite of that is actual dialogue, where the conversation itself is a learning process. You're learning by the give and take of dialogue. Thinking and speaking are interconnected processes. Neuroscientists have discovered that. Linguists have discovered that. People like Jerome Bruner, who was a great educational psychologist at NYU, whose work is actually very, very important, I think, to really keep alive and to build on, talked about how stories have a cognitive value, that we actually think in terms of stories. So we think that there is a crisis going on in our democracy. You look around, put on the TV, watch the other shows. Don't believe me? See what's on the other shows. See what's happening. Read the papers. There was a Princeton study 3 years ago that basically found that America is no longer a functioning democracy. Why is that? Because the average citizen, the man and woman of the street, the people in the poor communities, middle-class folks, their will, their ideas are not cared about in Congress, okay? Now, Trump came along and said, I've discovered the forgotten man and woman. And in one sense, he's right about that, okay? But if we look at the actual policies, we see, for example, healthcare. It's a really horrible plan where many millions of people would die so that they could give tax breaks to rich people, okay? This is in the actual policy itself. Horrible idea, horrible idea. As far as what he said about bringing back factory jobs, I think that's a great idea. I haven't seen much of that action yet on that front. But I think we need to go back for a long period of time, though, and see the decay of the working class in America has been a long time in the making. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party have both been complicit in that process. And, you know, with the outsourcing of jobs, with the growing wealth inequality, where 1% of our population now makes more than 90% of the population. 1% makes more than 90%. The average CEO in America makes about 500 times the average worker. If you go back 30 years ago, that number was only 40 times as much. So if you do the math, and whenever I teach, I always teach a little mathematics, even though I'm an English professor and I'm a humanities guy, I think we need to be clear with math, okay, and economics, that economics and politics are interconnected. They're interconnected with social life, and so we begin this hour-long program, this investigation in why we are experiencing a breakdown of community in America, that it begins in politics and it begins in economics. Okay? If we had more free time, more precious free time, we could have time to spend with our friends, with our family, with acquaintances, to make new friends. The idea of making new friends. Robert Putnam, who wrote a wonderful book called Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community, which came out in the year 2000. This book had a major impact on my life at the time. That was around the time when I was becoming very active in the Elks Club of Hoboken. And at the same time, I was very active in the Holy Name Society of St. Anne's Church. Those are two civic organizations that I was a part of, while St. Anne's was more of a spiritual civic. The Elks Club is more of a charity civic club organization, where you get to sit down with strangers, okay? Where you get to learn how to negotiate your differences, okay? If you're planning a fundraiser, you have to learn how to dialogue, to discuss, and say, well, I think we should use cans of soda instead of bottles of soda. It'll be cheaper, you know, and it might not seem like a big significant issue, but at least you're having dialogue, and you're not sitting home on the couch watching TV, okay? You're learning things like Robert's Rules of Order, okay, which is a basic public meeting etiquette, that you can share your thoughts and ideas and feelings in a public forum and not be angry, and do it calmly and be relaxed about that, okay? I think we need to learn in our country now, the citizens need to learn how to find their public voices. That has been the root core of my work as a teacher since 1997. Where not only did I complete one rescue mission in Harlem in a school, like I said earlier, where they told me, you do this, I said, that's not going to work, and I did it my way. I built community. I made a democratic classroom. The principal didn't like that, apparently, but it was successful. It worked, okay? I did it in 2 other high schools, all right? I was the rescue mission teacher in 3 New York City public high schools. Each time the regular teacher quit, ran, fled the building, I came in and I finished the job by putting in practice humanistic education, by caring about my students, by caring about their public voices, okay, by opening up a space, a democratic space, a listening space, by bringing in stuff to read that was relevant, okay, articles in newspapers, pieces from novels, poetry, you know, work that I felt would resonate with the particular students I was working with, okay, at the time, getting students excited about ideas, okay. I remember Bob Herbert, the wonderful New York Times op-ed writer at the time. His pieces were fabulous. I used to, you know, cut them out, and you know, right down the street from where I live, there's a stationery store in Hoboken, and I call it my office because there's a copy machine that was only 5 cents a copy at the time, and I would make copies of my own curriculum, Bob Herbert pieces, you know. There was one piece I'll never forget where he, you know, basically brought out the fact that Ronald Reagan began his candidacy in 1980 in a racist modality, with a racist speech that he gave in Mississippi, okay, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is where 3 civil rights workers were murdered, okay, back in the 1960s, trying to get black folk to register to vote. And what does Ronald Reagan do in 1980? He announces his run for presidency in that same town, Philadelphia, Mississippi. And he gets up on the platform and he says, states' rights, I believe in states' rights. Well, what is that all about? That's a coded word for racism, all right? To tell the good old boys down south who used to go for the Democrats that now you're safe with our party. We're going to represent your interests, okay? Bad stuff, okay? We don't need actors as presidents. We don't need reality show stars as presidents. We could use thinkers, we could use teachers, we could use compassionate people who care about folks. We think that we're in a big crisis now. We're in a very big crisis, and we want to be a part of that healing. I know I've been a little angry now in my speech here in the beginning of this talk, but I have to get it off my chest. I have to articulate this in a way that is able to at least share my feelings. And, you know, we believe that hope is necessary. Hope must prevail in some way. We've had some amazing guests on our show, in particular Stephen Eric Bronner, who was a student of Ernst Bloch, the great philosopher of utopia in Germany. And he brings us very hopeful messages when he's our guest, okay? We've had Stanley Aronowitz as one of our guests, one of the great public intellectuals of our time, a person who Cornel West has even said is his favorite and most enchanting intellectual. We've had Francis Fox Piven, the author of the famous, co-author of the famous Piven-Cloward Strategy with her husband, a program that, if it was allowed to continue, would have led to a basic income for everybody in America. A basic income for everybody. Everybody gets a check, okay? And why is that? One reason, because there are not enough jobs to go around. Okay, that's pretty obvious with automation and robots, robotic work. We don't have enough jobs to go around. And if everybody had a paycheck, this is something that even Richard Nixon was considering. And by today's standards, Richard Nixon would be considered a liberal in our political system today, because the system continues to move to the right. We've seen that over time. There are think tanks out there, okay, from the Heritage Foundation to the FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, that have been brainwashing the population now for 75 years that capitalism is the only way to go, that capitalism is the cat's meow, that socialism is bad, is evil, is wrong. And well, my wife says, okay, I should make the difference between socialism and communism. Well, socialism, I don't think socialism has ever really been tried in its purest sense. In terms of Russia, in terms of Stalin, he was a very evil man. He was a tyrant. He was an authoritarian man. That was not a pure socialistic system. Okay, the kind of socialism Bernie Sanders talks about is very different. It's about caring for people, having a social contract, having free education, free medical care. Everybody gets covered. Everybody in, nobody out. That's a caring, compassionate social system. And in order to get there, okay, and of course Michael Moore had his wonderful documentary film called Capitalism, a Love Story, which was very critical of capitalism. And there's that famous scene where he's in the Federal Hall in down by Wall Street. He's looking at the Constitution, the original copy of the Constitution, and he says, where does it say about capitalism here? Nothing. There's nothing in our Constitution about what economic system we should have. It says about in our Constitution that we need to have a democracy, okay? And capitalism, it seems to me, the pure form that we're experiencing right now is antithetical to democracy, okay? If we had a humane capitalism maybe, or a combination of socialism and capitalism, where, like I said, people had enough time that they could spend with their family, with their friends in the community, time to read books like I have on the table in front of me, okay? Books like Martin Buber, Between Man and Man. You take a look at that one. The great Martin Buber, who was a great philosopher of dialogue, okay, and the sacredness of dialogue. And I'm going to read a little bit of Martin Buber just to get us into a spiritual mode here. He says, creatures are placed in my way so that I, their fellow creature, by means of them and with them, find the way to God. Isn't that beautiful? That is wonderful. Don't ignore the stranger. That's something Jesus talked about as well. Buber said that reality between people is mutuality. Reality between people is mutuality. And here's one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole book is trust. Trust in the world. Because this human being exists, That is the most inward achievement of the relation of education. Because this human being exists, meaningless, however hard-pressed you are by it, cannot be the real truth. Because this human being exists, in the darkness the light lies hidden, in fear salvation, and in the callousness of one's fellow man the great love. So we have to value people, we have to value each other, okay? And I think the great spiritual teachings can move us in that direction. Here's another great quote. He says that man can become whole not in virtue of a relation to himself, but only in virtue of a relation to another self. We become whole in virtue of our relations with other people. So that basically, what that says is that narcissism is not a healthy thing. When everything is me. We're becoming a me generation with Facebook. Oh, look how many likes I have on Facebook. Look at me doing this. Look at me doing that. Mark Zuckerberg did something very good, which I want to give him an A+ for. Professor John gives Mark Zuckerberg an A+ for something he recently did, which is to say that the next 10 years of Facebook, he wants the focus to be on community. This is one of the best things I've heard from anybody in the corporate world in a long time, and it's about time. It's about time. I know Mark Zuckerberg also had an intervention in the Newark public schools. I know something about Newark because I taught at Essex County College for 5 years, and he gave $100 million to the Newark public schools, but apparently he didn't know where that money was going to go, and a lot of it wound up in corporate charter schools, which, from what I understand, are not so good on building community as they could be, as they might be. So we believe in hope and change. Okay. I think charter schools is a mixed bag. Some are better than others. But we would like with our TV show, okay, to be a repository of the best ideas about community, about democracy, and about education. All right. I would just say go back and read your John Dewey. John Dewey said that community is always in the making, democracy is always in the making, and that there's a strong link between education and democracy, all right? It's an idea that Dewey picked up from Thomas Jefferson, who felt that tyranny is best prevented by an educated population. So how are our people being educated today? This is a question that must be asked, and what are they learning? We think that increasingly education is all about success, training people for success. You're going to do great in the job market. That's what it's all about. And we think that that's wrong. We think education should be about creating better human beings, more caring human beings, more loving human beings, more democratic human beings, people who know what it's like to be in a democracy, who know what the word democracy means. When I see debates on TV about education, I keep waiting for them to say the magic D word, democracy. But they don't. They talk about success. They talk about, the global marketplace. We have to be competitive with China. We have to be competitive with this country and that country. But where is democracy? Have we forgotten about it? I think we have. And I think we need to get back to democracy and back to community, because they go hand in hand, because only when the citizens are talking to each other in our country can they share ideas about what's wrong and solutions about how to fix what's wrong. Okay? And this is why I agree with Richard Dreyfuss, and I support what he's doing with his civics initiative. And if he needs my help, I'm there for you, Richard, 100%. If you're watching us, I'm there for this. I'm there for this project, okay? Richard and I have had some wonderful phone conversations, and we're planning on how to move forward with this idea. And I think it's great that one of America's fabulous actors who is a great actor, but in a deeper intellectual way than a lot of shallow actors. We have a lot of shallow actors out there who are just like stars for the sake of being famous types. Richard Dreyfuss grew up in Queens, New York. He is a red diaper baby and proud of it, okay? He grew up in a town, in a neighborhood where they talked about socialism, okay? So Richard is a very bright guy. He's a very intellectual man. I think one of his best movies, with the one he won the Academy Award for, okay, The Goodbye Girl, he plays a caring, sensitive young man who is an artist, who's an actor, who's a musician, plays guitar, but who's caring and who's kind and who's articulate. And that's what we need in our country. We need articulate people. We need people, not success zombies. We want no more success zombies. We see a lot of that around the Trump administration, success zombies, okay? We want people who are loving and kind and caring. We want people who know something about Martin Buber, okay? Here's another book by Parker Palmer, Healing the Heart of Democracy. Healing the Heart of Democracy. I recommend, this is such a wonderful book, my goodness. The Courage to Create a Politics Worthy of the Human Spirit. Can I say that again? The Courage to Create a Politics Worthy of the Human Spirit. Spirituality and politics go together. And when I say that, there are people going to say, oh, what about separation of church and state? Separation of church and state simply means that there is no government can create a state-sanctioned religion. Okay, that's what it means. It doesn't mean that people who have political sensibilities, that politicians, that citizens who care about the society, that they can't draw on their spirituality to make political statements, okay? For example, Jesus, one of the great things he did was he threw the money changers out of the temple. Get out of here. Get out of here, money changers. Get out of here, wealthy people. He said the rich man, he said, is going to have a hard time getting to heaven. It's easier for for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than the rich man to get into heaven. Okay? Now, does that mean that we hate all rich people? No, we don't hate all rich people. But we think that the rich have to give back and pay their share and be responsible. For 30 years, we've heard Republican rhetoric. We've heard rhetoric from the right that poor people are lazy, that poor people are irresponsible, that it's your fault that you're poor. Why aren't you rich? When people who are born wealthy have a leg up, they go to better school systems, okay? This is all obvious, okay, to anybody who has even the slightest bit of political consciousness and awareness, but many people today don't have political consciousness or awareness because of the educational system. The educational system has kept them in the dark on these serious issues, on historical knowledge, okay, on philosophy, on literature. So we want to be a force of healing, a force of change, a force of community. I know I'm a little bit forceful here in this beginning of the show. Hopefully I'll calm down a little bit as we progress through the hour. But this is really an act of love. It's an act of caring. Claudia and I spent a lovely time this past weekend at my parents' home in Ocean Grove, which is a community on the Jersey Shore that they refer to as God's Square Mile. It's a very religious community. I got to see my mom sing in the great choir, 600 choir members, and there was my wonderful mother singing along, and with my wife, and my dad was there too. It was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful time. But the other thing that we did of note was that we visited the home of Nell Noddings. Now, who is Nell Noddings? Nell Noddings is somebody who everybody should know who is, because she is the person in education who made caring something of importance, okay? More important than success even. Okay? It's more important to be a caring person, says Nell Noddings, author of over 20 books, okay? Professor at Stanford, professor at Columbia, one of the leading intellectual luminaries of our time. But I didn't see her on the big media. You guys all missed the boat. You never featured Nell Noddings. Well, we're going to have her on our show in August. We're going to go down and sit on the porch where Claudia and I sat with Nell on Sunday, and we sipped white wine, and we talked education, and we told stories, and Nell showed us her garden, her wonderful garden that she's growing, and she gets out and she works the garden every day, and she's a beautiful person, a wonderful soul. She knows how to nurture people. Good educators know how to nurture people. That's the best thing about teaching, is you nurture others, and then in that process you can be nurtured yourself. So this is the kind of education we're promoting, an education that strengthens democracy, that strengthens people, okay, that's psychologically grounding, that teaches for sanity. And in many ways, as Erich Fromm said, capitalism is a crazy-making notion, especially in its pure form, which is hostile to human beings and cares only about profits and doesn't care about people. So thank you for watching this. Keep watching. We're going to continue now. We're going to go outside into the community of Hoboken and interact with people, maybe with friends or acquaintances or strangers, and I'll do some more talking as well. Thank you. Action. Okay, good. Wow, so the wonderful thing about Hoboken, it's got a great sense of community. We just ran into Miguel Maldonado on his bicycle, riding around, having a great time here on the Hoboken waterfront, where they made a famous movie with Marlon Brando, as we recall. And Miguel is a very interesting person. Miguel was a former board member of WBAI, which is I think one of the greatest radio stations in our country and our world in terms of non-corporate media. Amy Goodman has a wonderful program on there now, Democracy Now! Miguel was the board member and national board president. He's such a humble guy, but he was that. And he also was a board member for Reverend Billy in the Church of Stop Shopping, who was one of the most incredible performance activists in the world. Very dynamic, very interesting and important work that he does. And Miguel has a strong interest in nutrition, in healthy eating, and he's a very spiritual man. He goes to church every Sunday, and has a lot of thoughtful things to say, and we're so glad to have you on our show today, Miguel. So welcome to the Public Voice Salon, and in our show today we're talking about community and the healing power of community. What does that mean to you?
Well, what you were talking, that take me back when I was living in Lower East Side. And the fact that we have...
What is Lower East Side? Explain to our audience what that is.
Lower East Side is that area in New York, is the East Village. Yes. That's the way the real estate call it, which sounds more commercial oriented.
Fancier,
and they charge more money. And so, but we call it Lower East Side, which is an area from Puerto Rico, but at the same time it's a translation for Lower East Side, but we pronounce it in a Spanish way, because there was so many Latinos, and specifically so many Puerto Ricanos living in the East Side, and so they call it Lower East Side.
Let me try it. Lower East Side. Is that good? Lower East Side.
It means the translation is the East Side, Lower East Side. It's a Spanglish, and we had so many poets there. Pedro Piatri was basically responsible for doing. He used to do so many poems, and he used to do it, and he died. Rest in peace, his soul. But he used to do the translation and to use a term called the Spanglish. Very interesting person.
Well, that you mentioned Pedro Piatri.
Reverend. He called himself Reverend. Pedro Piatri.
Well, they recently had a show here at the Hoboken Museum in honor of Pedro Piatri. Danny Schott was the moderator. A wonderful program here at the Hoboken Museum.
Right. I remember. I went there for a few minutes. But what I was thinking was then how you go back, and my mind went back to show all of the things that we were doing in that community, which is a way to heal the community, the community gardens, the theaters, Puerto Rican theater, La Mama, Theater for the New City, and Charas, and all those organizations doing different things, poetry, art, painting, etc., etc. So, to me, all those artists participate in our community at the same time that they get involved in politics, specifically in part of the education area, when the people who got children are so concerned about their education. And to me, the participation of the people in different issues that affect the community is how you start healing the community.
Wow.
So if you don't participate, if you don't see what the issues that are affecting your own community, you don't heal your community. There's no way for healing if you don't participate, specifically from the art point of view, which is how much to give to the community, because it's bring the spiritual part that we need for us to heal ourselves and therefore to heal our community.
Now, Miguel, as of right now, there are 8 candidates running for mayor of Hoboken, but I think they missed a very important guy. I think you are the one. Have you thought about running for mayor or getting involved more actively? Why don't politicians say the things that you just said?
People to get some healing. If I run for mayor, I think that I'm going to spoil that. Well, it's like, I don't know. Politics kind of complex, and the way, which most of the time I don't think that has anything to do with democracy, because it's starting with the money that you need to run. You need to be the opposite side in terms of money. Like, I need to get more money than than your opponent. So. I don't know. I think that I had to. Sometimes I think maybe I should start and try. Like you get that little inspiration. Like, let's do it, because we can do so much good to the community. Not like some people that they are there because of themselves. They say, oh, the community is going to be better, but it's themselves who are going to be better. So we're trying to sacrifice for the community, but I don't know if I really wanted to get into that.
I've got to ask you a question, my friend. I want you to teach me how to give a good lecture, because you are a wonderful public speaker. We started this show, I gave a half-hour rant in my apartment, which I'm embarrassed to look at now. I think I just was all over the place. But you have such a focused way of speaking and articulating. Now, you had told me once in a previous conversation that you were giving speeches around the country on union activity. Is that correct?
I was a union rep and a union organizer. Yeah. And I also was part of the immigration movement back in the 90s. We organized the first immigrant march in Washington, D.C. in 1996. Like a nationwide.
I want to clap. That's fantastic. Claudia's clapping over there.
That was very inspirational, and we put together the movement. That was right after the 1 million men march, and we started the movement in Chicago by 3 persons: me, Carlos Arango, and Jack Medina. Wow. And we had a meeting, and Juan Luis Gutierrez. Not a congressperson, but a Mexican brother. And we started that movement in Chicago, and it was like 4 people. There was another person, 5 brothers and sisters, and his name was Jaime Medina. I think was his last name. Yeah. It was very interesting. We started there, and so many people thought like, oh my God, but we are not that many. Yeah. But the idea is what it counts. So it doesn't matter how many people you got. It's the dream. Right. And we push it forward, and we be able a year later and turn that into a reality. And we got like 125,000 people in Washington D.C.
What's your reaction to Donald Trump's presidency so far?
Well, it's been so crazy that I don't know even what to think. Yeah. It's been really crazy. Everything is like it's something new that you see in a person who's supposed to be very well coordinated and very well planned in terms of what he's thinking and what his agenda is. And I don't think everything is so crazy. And I think that the poor people are going to suffer the most. And because everything is being cut off to at least, I mean, like, for instance, just to give you an example, the Medicare and Medicaid, he's going to cut $1 trillion.
Oh my God, a trillion.
$1 trillion,
Ooh.
which means a lot of people going to die for lack of medicine and lack of medical attention, because the different states, they had to cut the budget, probably 25 or 20%. And the Medicare plan that they got in mind is going to have a devastating effect in the community. Not to mention that Medicare or the whole health industry count for 9% of the job for this economy, for the United States economy. I mean, financially, going to be a disaster because of the Obamacare that was able to the hospital to expand and hire more people, and not only that, when I mentioned hire more people, but at the same time, people who are making $50,000 and $60,000 a year. I mean, like a really good job, and all of that is on the air right now.
What do you think about the wealth gap? You think that's a big part of this? I mean, we're looking across the river at this so-called greatest city in the world, and there's a lot that I love about New York and historical New York, and once a great source of culture and intellect, and still in some ways. But it seems like the rents are so high, and it's become a place for, you have to be wealthy and fancy. It's the fancy people's town, and the stress level is going higher and higher. Can you offer your thoughts on New York City today? Versus what it was when you remember back in the old days?
Well, New York City back in the old day.
Lower East Sider and
I mean, people used to get buildings and fix those buildings and live on it. So there was a movement, and they were able to save some buildings. I mean, you get like, for instance, umbrella house. You are familiar with, as well as all the building. Charo was part of the movement. I mean, they took over and the
Charos. It's called Charas.
That was
not Charo the singer.
No, Charo.
Okay, Charas. Okay.
Or Shadow the
maybe Charo stopped by one day, but I don't know. Okay, yeah.
So Charas was part of the movement. I mean, they took like a whole school that was abandoned by the government, and they fixed it and turned into a community organization. So today there is no space for this kind of movement to start.
Wow.
All of that is gone. We were able, for instance, to say some churches in the Lower East Side, as well as other buildings. Today, there is no chance that for us to save anything. Everything is getting so expensive, out of the people possibilities.
Well, a good thing that we're doing right now is we're articulating these problems. In order to change, we have to first identify the problem. And the one thing I love about you, one of the many things I love about you, Miguel, is that you're never shy about sharing your thoughts about what's going on with the problems in the world, and you're so articulate. We've had so many great conversations in cafes in Hoboken, which adds to the cafe culture. We're a big advocate of cafe culture on our show. Too many of the laptop jockeys in the cafes just sitting there, all day long on the laptop and the thing. Come on, get off the laptop. Talk to this man. You'll learn something if you talk to this man. I learn whenever I talk to you.
Oh yeah, well, before people used to go to the cafe and talk to one another. Yes. Today, everybody turn their laptop and they talk to themselves. There is no exchange. I mean, a cafe is supposed to be a place for the community to go and know to one another.
Yes.
That time, unfortunately, is gone. I mean, we're still complaining though. We hope that the people can realize at some point that you cannot live in a cellular phone and a laptop.
Yeah.
I mean, there is
some good in there too. Yeah.
There's good, but you can. I mean, like they go back to the house, the same thing. They go to the cafe. Everywhere they go is with the cell phone or the laptop. And come on, we need to talk.
Yes. Now, I heard something hopeful. I want to share this with you on national television right now, Miguel, okay?
Oh, that's good.
That I heard something very wonderful, that Mark Zuckerberg, okay, of Facebook, he said that he has a plan for the next 10 years. He wants to focus on community building. And I thought, wow, I mean, that was really wonderful. So maybe this is a breakthrough.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what, I mean, this is the old all time. I mean, this is the community is to participate in different things. And there were, even at some point, I remember that in Chicago, there was one of the mayor back in the 80s that he even offered to pay some of the artists for the art.
Yes.
But I mean, art is, you don't get into the art because of money, because there is no money in there. But when somebody offers you to pay for you to do that work that you love to do, the thing that is inside of you, and you express yourself with some freedom, and it's great. But today, if we can find some resources for some, I mean, like the job that you're doing for the as a communicator.
Thank you.
I mean, if you can get some grant to help, you know, I mean, you can do like a show that even get somebody in a limousine, and we pay for that, you know. I had to take my bike.
Miguel, I want to say something. You're such a beautiful man. We love you. But in terms of like community, how do we start from scratch? How do we start where we are? You mentioned France. You mentioned, you know, in Europe. They spend so much more money in Europe. Trump just comes back from Paris, where he's flirting with the president's wife and this and that, all this crazy stuff. Right. But there's something important that we need to know and learn about France, which is that they spend a heck of a lot more money on the arts than America does. They recognize the power of art to wake people up, okay? Social justice in the arts is interconnected. You were with Reverend Billy in the Church of Stop Shopping, which is really a performance activist piece to wake people up. What is your thoughts about the arts and politics?
Well, that go together. I mean, so many artists express themselves through art. I mean, and they making a statement, political statement, without saying anything, yes. But with their hands they craft something. They protest, they support through art. So, but when the sources of that foundation is cut, like we're gonna have less artists. Yeah. The fact that you had to struggle to survive, that means that probably you're going to lose your thought in writing a poem or create some beautiful writing, because sometimes you are so deep into what I'm going to do tomorrow to eat, or how I'm going to survive to pay my rent and so on. So you lose. So the economical thing is connected to the way you're thinking, because sometimes you don't have the time to, especially as an artist, to express yourself through the work that you pretend to do or you want to do. So, you know, and life is getting very expensive. It's not like when Picasso was around.
Not like who? When who?
Picasso.
Oh, Picasso.
In the beginning, he got no time. I mean, he got no money, but he got plenty time to do his work. But surviving was easier than it is today. So for an artist, maybe there's another Picasso around, and potentially
could be somebody sitting on the couch watching our show, watching us from a smartphone, watching us on the moon, wherever they watch us. I don't know.
People need, you know, there's certain things that you need to take care of for you to develop as an artist, as whatever you're trying to do in life. Because most of the time you just spend your time thinking, how am I going to survive? Especially nowadays that so many, I expect like so many people are going to lose their job, and the economy in the United States is not growing. There's cut all over the place in terms of the budget. I mean, everything being reduced to 40 and 30%. Some departments going to be completely cut. It's, you know, what is coming is really scary, and we need to participate, and we need to organize. People need to get organized and participate in everything through different ways. You don't need to go to a political party. I mean, you can do work through a church, through a community group, through just a group of people getting together and talk to other people. Look at this. And politically, we can make a lot of changes, but we need to participate.
One question: have you been on Charlie Rose yet?
Not yet.
Show the camera, Claudia, over in New York. Charlie, what is Charlie? This man needs to be. And what about Rachel Maddow? What about all those people? This is the guy you should have on. My goodness, they're missing the boat with you here.
Just to make an announcement, in August, I'm going to have my second talk about food, liberating the food.
Liberating the food, yes.
Which means, for the people to have good food without pesticide, and all of those kind of things that they put in the food today. I mean, people.
Why is it in the healthcare debate, Miguel, they never talk about prevention? Everything is about what you do once you're sick. What about the talk about how to live a more stress-free life, nutrition, those kind of issues? It would save a lot of money also.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the way you prevent diseases, by eating right, by eating the food that is planted in a healthy way, and that's the kind of the thing that I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the way that how you can prevent people to get cancer, to get all kind of diseases that some of them we don't even have the cure yet. Right. I mean, I hope that eventually, but is to eat healthy is the key for people to be. To have a better life, to be happy. I mean, when you are sick, you're not happy, and it's not very comfortable for people to be around you, because you're sick. And don't talk to me. I have a terrible stomach ache or whatever. So Yeah. But so I'm gonna do the talk in St. John Church, which is 36 and Palisade.
In Union City, New Jersey.
Union City, New Jersey, and this is
Brian Stack is mayor up there.
The second Sunday in August.
Okay.
It's gonna be there. So. By the way, going to be 1 o'clock.
Cool. Claudia, maybe you could just show with the camera the water and just the place where we are with the trees over there, this beautiful park. That's Elysian Park just beyond there. People are just having a wonderful time being in nature with the way the water sounds. It's so healing and wonderful. You got the big city across the river, but all these natural elements are blending here in this lovely town that we love of Hoboken. And we're so grateful to be here with you, Miguel, spending these moments in dialogue. Also trying to teach our audience how to have better conversations, how to be in dialogue. This man has a lot to say. We're so glad that we finally got you on the show. I've been meaning to get you on for a long time. So,
but I like the subject when you mentioned in the beginning, the community healing.
The healing power of community is the topic of the show. Yeah,
it's needed. Believe me, never than like today we are in need of that in different community. Not only because we come into from the end an election, a presidential election that was really nasty, and I think it's time for the healing. Yes. But at the same time, there is no healing without justice.
Yes.
And those two go together. A community cannot heal if there is no justice for the community. And that is something that we need to point out. I mean, the people, when you also mentioned about education. So doing education in the community, justice is the number one thing that those communities need for you to start healing in that community.
And Claudia, who's filming us, my darling wife Claudia Canasto Chibuki, who is from a little town outside Bogota, Colombia, with a very strong sense of community. She has a lot of indigenous wisdom and spiritual feelings that she brings to our show. Our show would not have taken place if I didn't share this with her, and she didn't believe in my dream of having this show. So the show was actually born in love, and Paulo Freire says we need to teach for a world in which it's easier to love, the great Brazilian philosopher of education. So we want to talk about love and not be embarrassed to say, to teach for a more loving world. Do you think love and politics can also go together?
It does. I mean, we just have a president who believes that the only thing is winning is everything. And but I think that is more than winning. I think it's participation. And if whoever participate, you probably will win, but could be good when everybody can win. It's not about like a winner and loser. Yeah. It's about what about if we put in a way a model where we can see that everybody can win. And I think this is the most important thing, which is participation. Yes. You don't lose. Right?
Nobody loses, yeah.
Nobody loses. Everybody is a winner here. So, and I think that's the model we should develop. I mean, I know that recently the fact that Donald Trump is a winner, according to him, momentaneously.
Yes.
It's true, but we don't see things in terms of winning and losing, but we see things in terms of people participating, people loving one another. I think that is really important for us to bring healing through love. Love your community, love your neighbors, communicate with your neighbors. I mean, I live in a building, and sometimes there's some people that, for more than 6 years, I don't even know their name. Sometimes I'm not even afraid to look at them because they are like so quiet, and they have that look that I'm not interested in start a conversation with you. So it's kind of intimidating sometimes to even say hello.
Wow. You know how I learned to be more neighborly? I'll tell you, my secret is Claudia. Claudia is so much more tuned into the neighbors than I am, and she'll like come home and say, "Oh, I talked to this neighbor and that neighbor."
Right.
I'm like you. I rush too quickly. I think we should start a pact right now to start to slow down. Everybody watching us, we need to slow down. We need to have communities that are walkable, that people can see each other face to face, that we can get to know each other, we can grow in community and care about each other and learn how to be in community, because community and democracy are also interconnected. So if we lose our communities, we'll lose our democracy.
Definitely. I was just thinking, like, people used to do different things, even to go to work, and there was part of being like a sense of being part of a community, the working community, and so on and so forth. But there is something that lately they've been developed that model where people are rushing to everything.
Work home, work home,
That's
work
right.
home.
Work home. I mean, you got 30 minutes to eat, go back to work, and so even the food and the way that is put in together, it's called fast food.
Yes.
So everything is so fast, including your own food. You don't even have the chance to enjoy it. So we on this, like, we should slow down a little bit. It doesn't hurt us. Doesn't mean that So I think that's the way to go. Slow down a little bit. Let's reflect about what we're doing. Let's take a look at the kind of living that we are having. And believe me, if you slow down a little bit, you can have time for your family, for yourself, for your co-workers, for your neighbors, for everybody. But we just rush into everywhere. Everything is like from 9 to 5.
We're going to have to rush to finish the show now because Claudia tells me we're out of time. But it is such a pleasure to catch up with you here, Miguel. I hope this continues. You're always a welcome guest on our show. Good luck with all your wonderful spiritual work and nutrition and all the great political work that you do.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure. Thank you. See you later.